Welcome to Primavera Scheduling Videos on Demand. Today's spotlight is going to be on Primavera Contractor version 6.1. We're going to talk about what is Primavera Contractor and what it's not intended to be. Here is the program. This program is several years old. You could think of it as a stripped-down version of Primavera P6 Professional, but it's never really shared all of the characteristics of P6. This is truly a standalone program, and I know that concept won't initially make much sense. But we get asked quite often, can we put this program on a server so that several people can access the program? And the answer, unfortunately, is no, because this program uses a very simple database. It's a SQL database. It dates back to 2005, and that particular database is not compatible with the server. If you want to go with a server installation, you will have to look at Primavera P6 or Primavera P6 Enterprise Project Portfolio Management, a bit of a mouthful, otherwise referred to as P6 Enterprise or P6 EPPM. But this is still a very good standalone program that would allow you to schedule a typical project with up to 2,000 activities, which would still be a pretty serious schedule. So if you've never seen a Primavera product before, this is not going to seem unusual, but certainly for the people who are using the other products, it is, again, a bit of a simplified version of those programs. Now, for that reason, some people do find it a little bit easier to learn. However, I would also tell you that if you've learned this program, you can transition to Primavera P6 or P6 EPPM fairly quickly, certainly quicker than a person who's never seen any of these programs. And likewise, the people who have been using P6 or EPPM generally don't have any issues using this program instead. So to give a brief overview of what this program can do, you're only allowed to look at one file at a time, meaning project. You'll have to close that project before you can open another. So we go to the upper left-hand corner, File, Open, and I can choose one of my projects and click on Open. I'm the only person who can be looking at this file right now. Other people are going to be working on their own computers, and they're going to have their own database. Even though we all use the same database that's compatible with Primavera Contractor, we still have to work independently. And then if I want to give my file to someone else to let them look at it, I'll have to export it from this program, and they will import it on their side. So right now we're just looking at a basic schedule. And this is an older schedule, so I'd probably have to flip it back a few years to get it back to 2006. And this part of it looks very much like the other Primavera products, where you have a table area on the left that shows tabular data. On the right-hand side, you have a Gantt chart that will show bars, and if we want to show relationship lines, I can turn those on as well. And so that part of it is very similar. Now what's a little bit different is on the left menu and on the right menu you see these very large buttons. We've minimized those buttons in the other programs, and there's more of them because you have additional features that are not available here. And for some people this might be an advantage because when you're trying to learn the program and you don't know that these two little blue boxes on the left refer to the work breakdown structure, well, being able to see the words next to it, or at least the abbreviation, might help you out quite a bit. Likewise, on the right-hand side, I don't think these buttons would be too difficult to learn, but still you can make them nice and big, and it's just easier to navigate. On the other hand, when you get tired of these buttons taking up so much space, we can actually, by right-clicking, hide the text. I can hide the text on the left-hand side. I can hide the text on the right-hand side, what we would call the command side, the command bar. And you'll notice that by hiding the words, the buttons are a lot smaller and somewhat similar to what you would see in the other Primavera programs. So when we're building a schedule in a program like this, because I can only work on one schedule at a time, it's not really convenient for me to copy activities from one project over to the other one, which is a big time saver that we use in the other programs, where I just bring up both schedules on the screen, I highlight some of them that are in the one project, and I can very quickly copy over those activities to the other project. But again, we don't have that sort of opportunity here. Now, if you wanted to take the whole project and copy it, yes, I guess you could start from there and just strip out the activities that you don't want to see. So I've got this project open, and I'm looking at the WBS, the work breakdown structure. If I want to look at the activities, something that we saw a moment ago, I click on the green rectangle, and now I see the activities. And as I mentioned before, I can choose whether or not I want to show the relationship lines by clicking on this icon that's on the top toolbar. So for a person who just needs to build a basic schedule, certainly this is still a very good program. There's a few places where it does have a bit of a limitation. You'll notice here in the first column, we have these activity IDs. Now these are not my activity IDs, not necessarily the way I do it. But if I decided that I don't like these IDs and I want to go with a different system, in the other Primavera programs, I would just highlight some of the activities, or maybe all of them, and then I could tell Primavera that I want to renumber them. And I can choose a brand new prefix, a brand new suffix, and I'm done. It takes only a few seconds. In this program, one of the things you really have to keep in mind is you have to be deliberate about what you're doing. You have a little bit of control over these activity IDs. But if you get started with some IDs and then you decide you're going to change them, that you've got a better system, you're going to have to do it manually. You're literally going to be going into one activity at a time and deciding what that new ID is. There's not really a shortcut like we would have in the other Primavera products. So when you're building your brand new schedule, you're just going to want to keep that in mind. Get the numbering system right the first time, because it'll just be too time consuming to fix it later on. But otherwise, it's still a very powerful program that would allow us to add resources to activities or to add costs to activities. And when we say resources and costs, some people do get confused as to why do we almost talk about them as if they're different things. Well, in a way they are. Some people only cost load schedules. They want to put a dollar value on each activity, and this program can do that. And the process is pretty much just like the other ones. Other people just want to put labor hours or equipment hours on the activity. And again, Primavera Contractor can do that. And the process would be very similar to any other Primavera program. So that's still a very powerful tool that would allow us to focus on the real effort it takes to build our project. That on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, I could see the cash flow projection, or I could see the number of hours required to complete the project, to get an idea of what are the really intensive months in terms of resources and what are some of the lighter months. And so all of this can be achieved over here on the left menu by going into the resources window. And you'll see that I seem to have quite a few labor resources here. But for those of you who might know a little bit about Primavera, we have three types of resources: labor, material, and non-labor. Non-labor typically used for equipment. And we can assign multiple resources to the same activity. So you could have a foreman, journeyman, apprentices. Those could be three different resources all assigned to the same activity. And when you're building a new schedule, as I mentioned a moment ago, you do want to be fairly deliberate. So I go up to File, and I say New, which is automatically going to close the project that's currently open. So I might decide to call this, as far as my project ID, 17-001. My first new project of 2017. And of course, give it some name. Unlike Microsoft Project, we do have more control over the way that the schedule is really set up and how these new activities are populated. I can choose any start date that I want, so I might just go ahead and flip it over to January and pick January 2nd. If that's not the real start date, I'll come back later on and just put in the correct date. The must finish by date, we're going to skip that. If you take one of our classes, you'll know that we're not a fan of the must finish by any means. And then when we're setting up resources, you can actually fill out in advance, which I have not, some standard rates that you like to use. I don't really feel that's necessary because I have so many different unit prices. I wouldn't have just 5 standard rates that get used very often. So I leave it fairly generic, and when I'm building my resource, I'll put in the correct rates for each type of resource. Other than that, I've just added a new project. Now the next step for us, though, would be to talk about what's normally called project preferences, but over here in Contractor we call it project properties. Properties that we want to use as a setting, really, for all new activities. And so we go to the defaults here, and you pick some sort of numbering scheme. So maybe you decide that you'd like all of your activities to start off with CON. And I like to put a break between the prefix and the suffix. And so I'll go in and set it like this. And I'll choose some sort of calendar that I've created. Close that out. And that means my first activity that I've added will be CON 1000. In every other activity that I start to add, and I'm just using the right menu here as a shortcut, they're all CON. But I don't use just one prefix. So if I'm thinking about submittals, I probably want all my submittals to start off with a different prefix, which means I need to go back to the preferences, or what we would call properties over here in Contractor, and choose a different default. So I might decide they're submittals, and I want them to start off with SUB. And I'll turn this off for right now, because if I highlight something that's a CON, the next one's automatically going to be a CON. So to trick Primavera into allowing me to start over with a new numbering scheme, I needed to uncheck that box. Now when I click on this Add button, you'll see that everything I'm adding is a submittal. So not horribly difficult to do that. And for me, a typical project that I develop will probably have anywhere from 15 to 20 different prefixes. But again, if I come back later on and decide I'd rather have my submittal start off with just the letter S as the prefix, I'm going to be doing that manually for each activity. Now, I don't ever change activity IDs after the schedule's been published, but I'm talking about during the development phase when I'm still putting the schedule together, and probably no one has ever seen it, that I reserve the right to change my mind on some of these numbering schemes. So again, that's something we give up that's available in the other programs. But this program is nearly half the price of Primavera P6, so obviously when you're on a budget, that can make a huge difference as well. Otherwise, everything that we do in the other programs, in terms of adding activities, changing durations, I can even do something we call fill down, where I take every activity starting from the first row, and I tell Primavera that I want to make them all the same duration, things like that. We use the fill down command pretty extensively, because sometimes I'm copying down the calendar, I'm copying down a budget, I'm copying down a lot of different types of information from one activity to another. Now, where it does get a bit tricky in this program, there is no overview where I see all my projects listed. Normally, if you're looking at the other products, the main screen will show you a list of all your projects. I don't even know what these other projects are here unless I go up to File open, and there they are. But keep in mind, in Primavera P6 and P6 EPPM, we have a separate window that's part of the program that shows this information, plus a lot more detail. Right now, if I highlight this project called SAC Baseline, I couldn't tell you anything else about it. I don't know how many activities it has. I don't know if it's ever been updated. I wouldn't know the dollar amount of that project. Whereas in the other projects or products, we would know all of that in the overview screen without having to open up the project. And I could even change characteristics of that project without opening it. Even change the project ID, the project name, things like that. So you operate a little bit more blind here because I have to open up SAC Baseline to know anything about it. Now, when I want to copy a project, it does become a bit convoluted. Because what we do, for example, I'm going to cancel this. Let's say for some reason I want to copy this brand new project that I'm calling 17-001 as far as the file name. The only easy way for me to copy it is to export it. I would go to File, Export, and I would send it somewhere, basically on my hard drive, because this is how we get the projects out of the database. So I'd be exporting it from my database, and we sometimes get little glitches here depending on which version of Windows we're using. Sometimes I get an error message like that, but you can see that it's actually operating just fine. So I'll export the project, and then I'll bring it back in. And when I bring it back in, Primavera will realize, hey, you've already got a 17-001. So we're going to call it something else. So what will happen, and I'm not going to do the whole process here, but during the file import process, and again, getting that little strange error message, that's where Primavera will tell me there's a direct match, that this file is already in the database. And that's essentially how we do our copy and paste, by exporting it and bringing it back in and letting Primavera tell us that it's already there, assign a brand new ID, which we can modify later on, but nevertheless, it's a bit of a convoluted process. Now, while we're talking about the file format, the other advantage of this program is that you can exchange files with other people using other Primavera products. So if they're using P6 Professional, no problem. EPPM, no problem at all. Now the other way around is a little bit trickier because they need to know that you're using Contractor. They need to send you a file that's going to be for Contractor. So when they're exporting it, those other users have an option of choosing Primavera Contractor as their export method. But otherwise, I've really had no difficulty at all exchanging data between the programs. Now, again, we're not really explaining how to build a schedule here. We're just trying to give you an overview. But one thing I do want to dispel as far as, I suppose, a myth. This program is in no way optimized for contractors. They could have called it Primavera Armadillo. The word contractor does, I think, mislead people into thinking, well, I'm a contractor, so obviously I'm supposed to buy Primavera Contractor. No. There's nothing special about it in terms of how it would allow you to build a schedule for, say, the construction industry. The other programs are just as good, if not certainly better, for doing the same thing. Where this program would probably make more sense is that for someone who's only going to build simple schedules, a few hundred activities, you're not paying for something that can do 100,000 activities like P6 Professional. And for many people, obviously, that does seem like overkill for what they really need as a scheduling tool. On the other hand, it's much more powerful than something like Microsoft Project. Now, just because I sell this program, I'm sure you think I'm biased. However, I've used Microsoft Project off and on for 20-some years, and I've been using this program for 27 years, meaning Primavera in general. And Primavera is a much better program. I started selling the program because I figured after so many years of using it, why shouldn't I? Not the other way around. So again, that's just a brief overview of the program. If you'd like to learn more, feel free to come back, visit our websites. We have Construction Science, which is primarily where we offer scheduling services as well as dispute resolution. And then our training portal is called Primavera Scheduling. And that's where you'll see videos, such as this one posted, and a lot of other information regarding our online and in-person training. We also provide on-site training anywhere in North America. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the video.